Hello. So my name is Eva. This is my first reading blog. I just watched one on YouTube and kind of try to emulate a little bit of what I was seeing because I'm interested in sharing more of the books I've read. Um right now we're going to talk about Reminders of Him by Colleen Hoover. I wanted to tell you a little bit of who I am. Maybe then that helps you relate a little bit to why my opinion is going to be the way it is. I feel like I was very critical of Reminders of Him. Pretty critical, obviously, of Colleen Hoover's writing. So if you're gonna get upset about that, I don't care. You're not gonna change your mind or anything. I put a lot of effort and time, and I have very little time to be reading recreationally. So I want the books to be good. I want them to capture my attention and have something in it for me. And unfortunately, Reminders of Him did not have anything for me in the end, even though I really felt like we would relate on a couple levels with, main character Kenna. But so just a little bit about me. I live in the Western United States. I grew up middle class. I had a lot of siblings though, so there are a couple of plot points every once in a while that Colleen Hoover wants to write, oh, this person's poor, and I'm just kind of oh, how could I relate to that? But a lot of the times it's not necessarily what you think it is. And unfortunately, that was the case with this book as well. I am 26 right now, which is roughly the age of the characters. It seems like Kenna is 27. It seems like he's 28. Or, yeah. Um, he is Ledger, by the way. That's the name that she chose. I, at this point, feel like Colleen Hoover knows that people are like, wow, she picks weird names, and she does it to upset people. Just picking the worst name. Because that's not sexy. Anyways, but I've also worked in libraries since 2016, so about 5-ish years or 6-ish years now, and I'm currently a student of my master's. I work in tech services right now in an academic library. A mom to a toddler right now as well, and I was introduced to Colleen Hoover in 2020 with It Ends With Us, which is a book that I give 5 stars to. I recommend it to people. I recommend it to my sisters. So far, I mean, after that, I read Verity, which I did not love, and then I also read Ugly Love recently, which I kind of liked, but it was still a 3 out of 5. But my arm is already hurting from holding my phone. Let me try to relax a little. A breakdown of the plot, and I'm going to explain some plot holes that I found. I'm not going to probably edit this video too much or anything because I don't have the time for that again. I have a toddler. She's over there being distracted by Netflix right now while I'm trying to break down this video or record it. So I read one half of this book yesterday and I read the other half today. I just popped it on an audiobook I found on YouTube. And it was the Audible version, so it was a good version. It was, first of all, it was really vague in the beginning. I went in completely plot blind. I didn't know she had a daughter, didn't know anything about the main characters, didn't know what the story would be like. And I just happened to look up the Goodreads to kind of get an idea of the plot, and it was first review I saw was wow, Colleen really put her whole cohussy into writing this book. So I was it's gonna be good, this person saying she put her whole cohussy into it, so it must be good. And I just left it at that. I didn't really read much after that. I just decided to read it based on that one crazy Goodreads review. And it's at the beginning I was kind of confused, and it was pretty vague how Kenna and Nicole ended up in jail. And after jail, no, sorry, in prison. Okay, she ended up in prison, so it should be pretty severe, I feel like. And I feel like she could have just been pretty straightforward, yeah, she was in prison for this, and now she's out. But it was just kind of mystery, right? We're gonna have to piece this together. After prison, she ends up in this small town. Again, very vague why she went there. I was is her family there? She just conveniently, she's this orphan that doesn't have any family anywhere where she would end up with her family to help her get back on her feet. But no, she goes to this hometown. I don't know if that's where she lived when the accident happened. It didn't really, again, that was really vague. I don't know if that's where he died. So basically, yes, later on you do find out that she killed her boyfriend. They were 22 years old. in an automobile accident, and that's why she ended up in prison. And it didn't explain, how Colleen Hoover is. She has to like jump back and forth into the future and the past with like letters, and you're like, just tell me what happened. But the first plot hole is, one thing I did not understand again was, why did she go back to this town in the first place? Very convenient. Oh, so like his best friend that you very conveniently didn't know is also very conveniently out of engagement, and like there was just so many things. It was like, very convenient. So out of the whole 5 years you were in prison, he never thought to break up with his fiance. It just happened the week that you were coming back. Like it was just very, anyways. But so let me try to break down the plot as I understood it. So she got in this accident with this guy she was passionately in love with, and everything was perfect. We've never even had a fight. And then later it said they did have a fight. So it was very like contradicting. I feel like Colleen Hoover didn't quite put her thumb down on what she wanted their relationship to be, because it was like passionate at the same time. She is traumatized and doesn't know how to be treated by a guy that's good to her, and he buys her McDonald's fries. So that's like, wow, that must mean that he's really passionate and loves you. And I'm just kind of like, the bar is on the floor, Nicole. Like, why are you building this guy up so much when it really seems like they weren't that deep? And another thing is, like, it didn't quite so much talk about their love making habits, or why, when she did go to prison for this accidental car accident death, she was pregnant, and it didn't explain, well, why were you guys like having kids? This seems like very intentional while someone's in college, that they would also like, it didn't explain why exactly she was pregnant. And she was just kind of like, I was unaware, unbeknownst to me, I was pregnant. I hadn't had a period in a long time while I was doing my proceedings for going to prison. And I'm just kind of like, that's like your first red flag. You weren't having a period, and you were just like, whatever. If I had known I was pregnant, I would have tried harder to not go to prison. I'm like, you kind of did know, but like, anyways, I don't even want to think about that too hard. And she is back in town the first day. She surprisingly gets a whole ass apartment and a kitten, and like a little bit of furniture and like some things for her house before she even gets a job in the town. And then it kind of described like how difficult it was for felons to get jobs, and she does get a job, which is like part-time and also pays minimum wage. And I was like, in this economy, there is no way that she found a job, or no, there's no way she found an apartment that like didn't ask her for a job already, and that she apparently immediately starts struggling to pay her bills, even though like the book seems to take like in the span of a week. So I'm so confused why bills are due anyways. But so she goes to a bar. She just got out of prison. Maybe she's a little lonely, maybe she wants a little physical attention. Of course, apparently there's nobody else in this usually busy, good business bar. There's like no one else for her to go up to sleep with and all this stuff, even though it's also described as like this college town. So I don't know, it describes this, first of all, it describes the town like a very derelict, like no one lives here. There's like 4 people that live here. And then it's like, oh, but it's a buzzing college town, and this bar is like, this makes lots of money for this guy named Ledger. And it was like the name of his bar was like Wards or something. That was like his last name. But she goes there, apparently doesn't meet anyone else, and she meets Ledger. And it was very vague to me how exactly they liked each other or why. And because he's like, I have a hard and fast rule, don't sleep with my customers. And then somehow she ends up in his lap, and you're like, wait, what? How did this happen? Like, what? I was like giving whiplash for like what the plot was, or like how, I don't know. So then they also are like, I don't know. I always thought they were like in the bar, and she was like the last person there, and she only had a coffee. She didn't drink, and she somehow sits on his lap, which I thought was in the bar, but I guess it was in an alley. And then also it was like in his truck. So it was very interestingly written. I didn't think it made a whole lot of sense what was going on between them. I was just kind of like, huh? Like, and the sexiness factor really wasn't there, and like they didn't really get too far, which was weird to me, because I'm like, you just came out of prison. I would understand if she like slept with him right then and there or with someone else, right? It didn't have to be Ledger, but she wanted him. She goes outside and is like grinding on him and stuff. Sees that he has a truck that was from her first date with her previous guy, the one she killed, and she's like, "Oh my god, wow, his name is Ledger. Wow, this is the best friend of the guy who was my ex. Rest in peace." And so I'm like, huh? Like, how did you not ever know? So, like, that's my first major complaint. I call major BS on the fact that Nicole did not know, what's his name? Scotty. She didn't know Scotty's best friend. And they were together for 6 months. And in her first date, they went on a date in Ledger's truck and went to go get gas in it. And it was like bright orange F 250. And somehow in those 6 months, the topic of best friend never came up. And it describes that Scotty also worked with Ledger. So I'm like, so he like lived in the same town. It's a college town. He was going to school there. Like, because they're 22. He's like finishing his bachelor's degree. And I'm like, so he lives there, he works with him, and somehow in 6 months she never like came in contact or talked about Ledger, and I just called major BS on that. And the timing, like this doesn't describe that this book was written in like 2002. She went to jail and an Uber already existed. With first of all, like all of this plot could have been avoided if she had just taken an Uber the night that she accidentally killed Scotty. I'm like, okay, so Uber existed and you didn't take one, why? And also, so like there's technology. If she was like my best friend Ledger, curiosity would be that you would want to look up that person, and be like, oh, that's who his best friend is, or like they would have each other on social media. Like, I just don't understand that plot point of like, I don't know who he is, all I knew was his very unique name. I'm like, girl, like you must have had selective memory or something, because anyways. And it also, let me see. I'm just referring to my notes because I know there were some things I definitely wanted to get in. I do want to add right now that I have a little bit of a complaint over the lack of intimacy for Nicole and Ledger. But it was just like maybe 3/4 of the book before anything happened. It might have even been further than that. And a lot of her other books are not like that, like they'll describe more like lovemaking scenes. And it's not like this is what I came for necessarily, but it was a little boring because there wasn't anything. There were some things I felt like were unnecessary filler, but I'm like, you could have just filled this with like some sexy scenes here between this, because I was like losing interest. Also with the prison thing. So she describes that she described literally by title Orange is the New Black, which is a show that I watched like majority of the seasons. So I was like, she went to prison. Are they going to talk about that at all? No, they don't. They don't really talk about it other than the fact that she had postpartum depression after she had her child. And also that she, like, they didn't describe if she had a girlfriend in prison, which in Orange in the New Black, Orange is the New Black, and other, like, accounts of women being in prison, if you have a girlfriend and you're in prison for several years or whatever, or you have some sort of sexual interaction with someone, like, I couldn't look down upon that, and I, like, get it, but the only thing she apparently did was make out with a guard, which I'm like, whoa, like, did she seriously not care about her life so much that she was, like, willing to have more time added to her sentence so that she could get her, like, her socks off with this prison guard? So I was like, so they only made out once, and this guy that was in power didn't do any single other thing to like harass her or ask for anything else. It was only like a way of establishing that Nicole is very straight. Yes, we're mentioning Orange is the New Black, which has a lot of bi women and gay women, but Nicole, she's special. She does not like girls. And there's like a girl they mentioned, I forgot her name, that helped Nicole out after she had the baby and she came back into the hospital, into the prison. There was a girl that noticed she had postpartum depression and was like trying to help her. And so you're like, so this girl is so important to you and got you to be drawing, making art, writing poetry, and writing these letters that she was writing to Scotty, which were like a huge plot point. but they didn't really mention the girl other than like, oh, she was really important for me to get out of prison. So I was like, are you gonna like describe that they were like girlfriends or something? Like, why were they together a lot of times? And anyway, so it doesn't even describe her like as a friend. It was vague of like only she was important, and you're like, oh, she's important how? And then it just like never mentions her again. Um, so when she's, like I said, she had the baby, she's in prison, she's depressed. This lady, this mystery lady, gets her to start writing letters and getting out of her depression simply by writing the letter. And like only one time they had a talk, and that cured her postpartum depression. And I was like, I don't know if Colleen Hoover is like being a little privileged right now, but she seems to not really know what postpartum depression is. And I can totally understand Nicole having this for a long time, especially because she's like probably already depressed because she killed her boyfriend accidentally. But there's a couple plot holes medically, which I'm like, look, I'm a mom. I had a very hard pregnancy. My daughter was preemie. But it didn't make any sense what happened with the child, okay? And the child is named Diem. And I just hate that name. I'm like, hey, Ledger was pretty bad. But when I heard Diem for the first time, I was like, are you fucking kidding me? Like, what kind of a name is that? Carpe diem, let's get drunk and drive and kill your father. Like, why would she name her Diem? It didn't even, like, explain why. Like, it was just, like, such a dumb name. But let me see. Okay, so the baby was born preemie, supposedly. That doesn't explain why. Doesn't say a medical condition, or was it the stress of being in prison? No, it was just literally like, she's preemie, and she had a hard time breathing. So instead of me getting 2 days of bliss to hold her and bond with her, they just ripped her out of my arms and took her to the NICU. And I was like, girl, like, if she was preemie, mom most likely needed attention too and needed to be in the NICU as well and getting certain type of, after care. But no, they were like separated, and also I'm like, did like skin to skin never exist in Coho's world? Like, if the baby was preemie, skin to skin would help the baby thrive, and like they literally like just took her away. And I think Colleen Hoover needs to volunteer in a hospital so she can understand a couple things more. And little girls, my little girl was preemie. They typically develop their lungs better than little boys, so like as soon as she said, and her something was wrong with her lungs, that's why we couldn't leave. I'm like, that's like very convenient. And also the plot point didn't really make a difference for anything. I'm like, she could have seen her for 2 days and still have her taken away, and it still would suck. Why did it have to be like she was taken away within 2 minutes? Like she just didn't give her any opportunities to bond. So I was like, if she doesn't want anything to do with her daughter, I'm like, with her daughter, it's probably because they didn't bond. And I don't know. I was like, so who the hell was like breastfeeding this baby? Was it Ledger? Was Ledger breastfeeding the baby? Was it the grandma? Like, so anyways, I'm like not explaining the plot very well, so I apologize. This is my first video like this, but essentially she has the baby and like signs over her rights, because I'm like, you have rights as a mother. Like in Orange is the New Black, it talks about lots of women that have kids, and yes, there is issues, but you don't have to like immediately sign away your rights as a parent. Like someone can take care of them for you. And then only explain that like Nicole made like this very small effort to ask her one family member that exists in this whole book planet, which is her mom, will you take care of the baby? And the mom is like, why the fuck would I do that? Like she was literally unnecessarily so cruel. And that's the only person that she asked. She didn't have any friends, I guess. No one. She didn't know anyone else. But the parents of Scotty actually are the ones that end up with the baby, and that was very unclear, because it's like the little child is running around in a yard with these two people named this and that, and I'm like, who the hell is this? Like, like it didn't tell me right off the bat that this was Scotty's parents. It took me a minute for that to sink in, that I was like, who is these mystery people that are taking care of Diem? And then finally I'm like, oh, it's Scotty's parents, and like that wasn't very clear. Also, another plot point was that as soon as baby was taken away, she started writing these letters to like be cured of her depression. She wrote over 300 letters to Scotty that were like telling of their relationship and stuff and like added to it. And which it also was like, okay, a little bit of a plot point here, or a plot hole. She wrote over 300 letters, and she was in jail for, or she was in prison for 5 years. So that was like one letter on average every 6 days. I like threw the math out there because I thought that was weird that when she got out of prison, she didn't do anything with the letters really, other than for it to be like a thing that just, you know, like Coco was just obsessed with manuscripts and letter writing. If you remember Verity, it was like, oh my gosh, there's like evil letters and like a manuscript that can ruin everyone's life. And it was like, she's obsessed with that concept. I'm like, okay. But when she came out of prison, though, she continues to write letters to Scotty, but she writes one like every day. So I was like, you were sitting in prison, bored out of your mind, and you only wrote him a letter like every 6 days. But when you were in regular life and you have a job in a grocery store and a second job at Ledger's bar, and you work like 18-hour days, and somehow you have time to write every day now. Like, it was just very strange. I was like, like, why is she writing so much? Does she not have anything else to do? But anyways, Ledger is trying his darndest to like keep Nicole away from the family. So like literally he's kind of like, I kind of like her, and like I would probably still talk to her. And then I think they find out like who they are. Like Ledger finds out that that's Nicole. Nicole admits like, I knew that after we started making out, but I didn't want to say anything and ruin the vibe, you know. And she also ends up, I don't remember how exactly, but she ends up in front of Scotty's parents' house, or at Ledger's house or something, and he's like living very conveniently like right across the street from them. And she's like, I want to see my daughter. And she's super crazy, and she like runs, like she just gets super manic and like runs towards Scotty's parents' house. And Ledger stops her, and he's like, look, you need to go away, because if you don't go away, I'm gonna call the cops on you. So he like really threatened her, and like I don't know why that wasn't enough for her to be like, I don't want to talk to this dude. Like, he's not obviously gonna be the avenue for like me to get close to my daughter. So then he also offers her a job, because he's like, look, if I get you a job, we'll just get you out of my town quicker. And it's really weird, because then later, like, his coworker, who is like this guy just put there to make Ledger jealous, when, you know, Nicole comes to work with him, this guy and her they like talk, and somehow that makes Ledger like super jealous, that he's like, are you guys fucking? Like, it was just so weird, because I'm like, Ledger seems so level-headed in so many aspects and patient and kind, and then sometimes he just has like these really toxic moments where I'm like, girl, you better watch out. Like, this is a red flag. But that guy points out to Ledger, he's like, why'd you give her this job? You could have just given her a wad of money and told her to leave. And Ledger's like, you're right, I like her, and that's why I give her a job, because I want to see her. I was like, what? Like, what is this book? And so I also thought it was really weird. So the parents of Scotty find out that she's in town, and that they accidentally went to the grocery store which she was working at, and she like gets really crazy and tries to like chase their car down because she wants to see her daughter. And like, that also was very strange. I'm like, you wrote like 300 letters to your dead boyfriend, but didn't write a single one to his parents, who you knew had your daughter, so that you could kind of start to establish yourself, like, hey, I'm coming out of prison in a year, I would really like to connect with you and see my daughter. Like, no, she didn't write a single letter to them, never established herself as like a good, nice person or anything. So I was like, okay, like, what did you expect, you know? She runs after their car, and they decide to get a restraining order on her. So like, everyone in this town is basically shooting down her luck on like getting to meet her daughter. um And I also, it was a plot hole too, that she said, like, she calls Ledger, said, I need you to pick me up because I got the restraining order. I'm so distraught, and I need to go home because I feel like I'm having a panic attack. But I also don't know anyone in this town except for two people, which is Ledger and my daughter. And I was like, girl, you don't even know your daughter, so like, she doesn't count. Second, you say you only know Ledger otherwise, but you knew Scotty's parents, and you literally stayed at their house. Like, I don't know why, like, it made it very, like she had a point out, like, I don't know anyone in this town except for Ledger's. Like, you do know other people, though. Obviously, she's not going to call the parents, but I didn't understand that, like, paragraph. Also, another plot hole it's not a plot hole, this is a complaint. I don't like that Colleen Hoover writes characters that are primarily like skinny. Like there are some racial things that I want to like comment, but I don't think I'm ready for that because I haven't read a lot of her books yet. But I don't understand why like she writes all these characters skinny when Colleen Hoover is not skinny, and I like that about her, and I relate to the author that way. And I see her Instagram, I'm like, she is a mid-sized to plus size woman. I obviously don't know if that's like just a figment of what it looks like on social media, but she looks like a mid-size range woman. And somehow all of her characters are these skinny women that never eat. Like it literally that never describes that Nicole eats like once. Like she drank a coffee at Ledger's bar and that was it. Um, but of course, when Ledger and her just can't stay away from each other and they decide to make love, it's just like, he lifts me up, he throws me, he picks up my legs, he's eating it up, and you're like, she's so, she's obviously a smaller woman, but like, it wouldn't hurt to write her as a bigger woman, and in prison, you're not eating necessarily healthy. And they're like, oh, she has a great ass. It's like, how? Like, is she just sitting on her butt in prison all the time? Or was she, like, getting workouts in every day? Like, it just didn't really describe that. So I was like, okay, like, I don't know. I'm a mid-sized to plus-sized woman, and I would like to see that representation. I'm like, it wouldn't take away from the story if you described that she was a little chunky, or that she was eating, or that she was stress eating, because, good lord, she was stressed. And, what else was I gonna write about this? She also lives next to a Down syndrome girl and works with her. That her name is Lady Diana. I don't know why they called her that exactly. I must have missed the explanation. Um, but after they finally, after her and Ledger finally make love, she goes and says like, or he asks like, I gotta ask you like what happened that night, and um, she reads him a letter that she had written to Scotty from her perspective of like what happened that night. And I'm like, okay, that was kind of awkward. Like you couldn't paraphrase and just tell him what happened. You had to like pull out the letter and like tell him about it, which was really funny, by the way. The letter that she wrote, she went to work her first day after she was doing her training. She literally printed all the letters off of her Google Drive that she had written to Scotty. They weren't like in notebooks. She just had to somehow have access to a computer, and she had all of them on a Google Drive, and she printed them out. And I'm like, she fucking printed over 300 pages on her first day. I'm like, and like presumably a family dollar. I'm like, how did she do that? Because that must have taken ages, and so nobody was around watching her print 300 pages or something, and most likely she had to like put more paper into the printer. So I was like, that was like kind of wasteful and unnecessary. But she reads the letter to Ledger. Ledger's just like, oh my god, he like gets really upset and like throws all the tables and all the chairs off of his truck, like gets all upset, and then he's just like, all right, well, thanks for telling me. Like, I want to pursue a relationship with you, and I want to like, and I'm building a house, very convenient. I split up with this girl, and we're gonna go live in this house together, and we're gonna see what we can do about getting you reunited with your daughter. So like that was essentially the big plot point. He's giving her a chance, even though he was kind of the one standing in the way a lot of the times. She does get to see her daughter at the very end scene too. I was kind of like hoping for a little bit more of that daughter mother time, but it was just kind of like at the end tacked on, a little happy ending. Um, Let me see. And then just a random little tidbit too that I didn't love because I am a parent. Ledger says that he's like very unsure about Nicole because he's like, I don't know if I start telling her that where she goes to dance class and where she does pickleball and what she does all day, that she's gonna come and kidnap her. Like he literally said something like that in the book. And then the next chapter was like, so Nicole asked me a bunch of questions about DM because he spends like an ungodly amount of time with DM. And he's like, he just starts telling her. He's like, yeah, she goes to dance class down there. So I was like, what? Like, he just literally said how dangerous that is, and I agree. It is dangerous. Like, why is he doing that? And then he was just started doing it. He's like, yeah, she goes to dance class over there. Like, she just went yesterday. Which I'm like, if Nicole was really unhinged, or if prison had any effect on her, maybe she would have been like, well, then I'm going to go Tuesdays at 6 over there. Like, she didn't, though. But Obviously, you know, Nicole had to be a good character in order to get what she wanted out of the story, but I thought that was really sketchy. I'm like, Colleen, you like walk around telling people where your kids are at, because that was really weird. But overall, my rating is 3 out of 5. I don't think it like wowed me at all. I am gonna put a little review on Goodreads. You're welcome to follow me there. You're welcome to follow my book Instagram, which everything will be linked in the bio. Overall, it is easy reading, but it didn't captivate me. And my last note is that Scotty did not need to suffer after the accident. He didn't need to be alive with his arm dismembered. Like, like it just was very weird to me how like she made him suffer and like crawl out of the car. To like it like made it worse. Like honestly, I would have a hard time still as Scotty's parents to accept Nicole back into our lives, knowing that she had like left and didn't call it. Like she was so high out of her mind she couldn't even manage to call the police. And I was like, but didn't she know like that if you don't call the police, like I don't know, like there was just so much about that aspect of like he could have just died and it could have left it at that and it would have been easier for me to accept that Scotty's parents accepted her. But instead it was like he suffered greatly and she did not. And so I was like, I don't know if this is like a fair ending. Scotty really suffered. Because in one point, Ledger's talking to Scotty's parents, and he's like, she did her time. Has she? Why do we have to continue to make her feel guilty? It's like, because 5 years in prison doesn't bring Scotty back. And like, people loved him, and Ledger loved him. So I was like, really gonna say this right now, Ledger? Like. So, anyways, that's my review. I'm gonna end this here because my phone's getting hot. Tell me what you think in the comments, but like I said, don't come for me. I don't care what you think about it. I'm just over here sharing my thoughts. Maybe there will be some people that have like-minded thoughts about it. I do recommend you read it and make your own thoughts. So, yeah, bye.